So friends, lots of breaking legal stories today, and they're all good on the accountability front. Is it just me, or does it feel like maybe justice is pulling on its running shoes? Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So, friends, it feels like maybe justice is struggling to get up on its feet, maybe even taking a few baby steps. Let's quickly roll through 3 of the breaking legal stories that were reported today. The first one has to do with Donald Trump's taxes. This from The Hill. Supreme Court declines to shield Trump tax returns from Congress. And that article begins, the Supreme Court on Tuesday rejected an emergency appeal from former President Trump seeking to shield his tax returns from House Democrats. Trump filed an emergency appeal with the Supreme Court late last month after a lower court declined to reverse its ruling, mandating that he turn over his tax records to the House Ways and Means Committee. The order, which had no noted dissents, 9-0 before the Supreme Court, caps a multi-year legal battle and paves the way for the release of Trump's tax records. So friends, maybe now we'll know whether Donald Trump really ever was a billionaire, millionaire, maybe he's a thousandaire. And we also may learn whether he was compromised as a result of financial entanglements. So we'll stay tuned to this story. The next story that broke today is about Lindsey Graham, because Lindsey Graham has finally run out of rope. Every single court, including the U.S. Supreme Court, ordered Lindsey Graham to sit for grand jury testimony before a Georgia state grand jury so he could testify about the election crimes of Donald Trump. Here is today's reporting about Lindsey Graham. This from the Washington Post. Lindsey Graham testifies before Georgia grand jury in election probe. And that article begins, after months of failed legal challenges, Senator Lindsey Graham appeared Tuesday before a special grand jury investigating efforts by former President Donald Trump and his allies to overturn Trump's 2020 election loss in Georgia, the latest high-profile witness in a probe that is believed to be nearing conclusion. A sheriff said that Graham entered Fulton County Courthouse around 8 a.m. to appear before the grand jury, which is hearing testimony in private. Kevin Bishop, a spokesman for Graham, later said in a statement the senator testified for just over 2 hours and answered all questions. Answered all questions? Well, first of all, that was put out by a Graham mouthpiece, a spokesperson, so you'll excuse me if I don't believe it. And the follow-up question is, well, how did he answer all questions? Did he answer some of them by saying, I'm pleading my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, which Lindsey Graham undoubtedly has. When I knew Lindsey was going into the grand jury today, this is what I tweeted out. Good news that this duplicitous windbag is finally being forced by the courts to testify to the Georgia grand jury about Trump's election crimes, and Lindsey's own call to Brad Raffensperger, quote, urging him to toss out lawfully cast ballots, close quote. What's the over-under on Lindsey pleading the Fifth? The reason I say Lindsey Graham absolutely had and has a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination is because a fellow Republican, one of his own tribe members, Brad Raffensperger, Georgia's Secretary of State, said Lindsey called me a couple of times, and what he was saying to me, I interpreted as, quote, Graham urging me to toss out lawfully cast ballots. That gives Lindsey Graham a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Doesn't mean Lindsey Graham pled the Fifth, invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege in the grand jury. We don't know that yet, and you'll excuse me if I don't buy a Graham spokesperson's word for it. I'm quite sure Lindsey Graham's lawyer advised him he should plead the Fifth, because a lawyer is supposed to zealously represent somebody's legal interests, not their political interests. And Lindsey Graham could be damaged legally if he testified about those phone calls that he placed to Brad Raffensperger. That's separate and apart from Donald Trump's criminal phone call to Raffensperger. You remember the one, find me 11,780 votes so you can corruptly declare me the winner in Georgia. So because grand jury proceedings are secret by law, we don't know what Lindsey said in the 2 hours or so he appeared before the Georgia State grand jury. Maybe he testified fully and truthfully. What are the odds? Another story that we will stay tuned to. And there's a third legal story that I want to take on, and this one has to do with another court argument that was held today in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and it had to do with whether this special master that Trump-appointed Judge Aileen Cannon put in place to review all of the evidence that the FBI seized from Mar-a-Lago pursuant to a lawfully issued search warrant. You'll recall that Donald Trump demanded that all investigations into his crime stop and a special master be appointed to take his time and review all of the evidence that the FBI seized from Mar-a-Lago to see if there were some privileged materials. There really is no legal basis for that, but Trump-appointed Judge Aileen Cannon granted Donald Trump's demand. Well, today, the Department of Justice argued to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals that the special master nonsense should be thrown out in its entirety because there really is no lawful procedure or precedent supporting what Judge Cannon did. Here's the reporting on how that argument went today in front of the 11th Circuit. Appeals court is dubious of Trump's arguments for special master review of Mar-a-Lago search. And that article begins, a panel of federal appeals court judges, all appointed by Republican presidents, on Tuesday were dubious of former President Donald Trump's arguments for why the FBI's search of Mar-a-Lago required a special master to review the materials that were seized. During 40 minutes of oral argument at the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, the three-judge panel posed several skeptical questions for the Trump team, suggesting they were not convinced that Trump had shown that an extraordinary judicial intervention into the investigation was necessary. And it looks like Neil Katyal either watched or listened to the oral argument because he tweeted out his take, and we all know Neil Katyal knows his way around an appellate argument. Here is Neil Katyal's impression. My God, in the Trump special master appeal, I don't think I've ever heard an oral argument go worse for a litigant. The panel is 3 judges, all who happen to be appointed by Trump, and they are demolishing Trump's lawyer. It's not close. And I think one of the 3 judges was actually appointed by George W. Bush, and the other 2 were appointed by Trump, but certainly all Republican appointees. So it looks like, if we can read the oral argument tea leaves, that perhaps soon this special master thing will be put out of its misery, and it will no longer serve as an impediment to a full, aggressive, robust criminal investigation of all of the evidence that was seized from Donald Trump. from his home, from his property at Mar-a-Lago. So friends, at least it feels like justice is up on its feet, stumbling forward. We now have a trio of prosecutors investigating the crimes of Trump and company. We've got federal special counsel Jack Smith. We've got Georgia State District Attorney Fani Willis. Heck, even Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is poking his nose under the justice tent with yesterday's reporting that the Manhattan DA's office is reinvigorating its investigation into the hush money payments that Donald Trump made to Stormy Daniels. So, maybe justice is up on its feet, taking some steps, maybe beginning to walk at a brisk pace, soon to break out into a jog, maybe a run, maybe a sprint toward the finish line. Justice, because justice. Friends, we've got to stay on it. We've got to stay on it because it feels like the tide is turning and it feels like we just may get there together. Friends, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.